Hi there, everybody. My name is Shakira Rifos, and I am the Education Outreach Manager here at the California Film Institute. Welcome to the 2022 Docklands Documentary Film Festival. You all just watched Let the Little Light Shine, and I am here with talent and principal Isaac Castellaz. Hi, Isaac.
Hello.
With producer Rachel Dixon. Hi, Rachel. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
And Kevin Shaw. Hi, Kevin. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Of course. Now, this is a really exciting film for someone who has been a lifelong educator and is just extremely passionate about working with students. Coming off of the energy of the end of the documentary, I want to make sure to check in with Isaac first. I mean, I think like the elation of how the issue with NTA was resolved it was palpable for me when I watched it. I don't think you always watch a lot of films about like this like deep injustice that you see happening to like families and children, and get a sense of like resolution. Can you give us a little bit of the feeling of what it was like in the moment, um, when you heard that the decision was going your way?
Sure. The feelings that I experienced as first the judge was reading his decision and then later finding out that the plan had been dropped altogether in many ways was one of disbelief, frankly, because of how unprecedented our victory was. When the judge granted the injunction, we believed that the school would continue to survive through at least the next school year, but that there'd be a longer legal road ahead. And that's what we all expected. But I don't know that any of us expected for Chicago Public Schools to completely abandon the plan after the injunction was granted. And so when I speak about that feeling of disbelief, I'm speaking specifically, I guess, about that moment, because we, a school of 750 students, 75 or so staff members, and then of course, a regiment of deeply committed families, had defeated the third largest school district in the country. And so in that respect, it was unreal. In another respect, it was completely gratifying because everyone who was engaged in the fight believed so deeply in our school, in our community, in the progress that we had made to that point. And we wanted to save our school for, most importantly, our children. But even beyond that, the film does a great job of talking about the legacy of the school, its relationship to the Harold Ickes homes and all the people who were displaced. And so for me personally, and I know for many others, the fight to save NTA was as much for them as it was for us and the kids who were in the school currently enrolled.
I think something that is very clear in the documentary, and I want to chat about this with you, Isaac, and Kevin, I want to touch on it later with you, is that the parents who were against the decision, um, who were fighting against you, they felt really entitled to an opinion that isn't necessarily like rooted and based in equity. It was really about it seemed like about fear and keeping a status quo that isn't serving the whole community, of course. Do you feel like the parents eventually were able to understand the implications of what they were asking for, or how does that live with you as just like having a bird's eye view as a principal of the school?
I'm not certain that the families who were advocating most strongly, or the people who were most strongly advocating for the plan, even to this day understand the gravity of what it is they were asking for. But I think that unfortunately, it fits into a larger narrative. So when you hear Tina Feldstein talking about community, she's not talking about NTA. And frankly, she's not talking about Black families at NTA. She's not talking about families who live in the Long Grove homes or the Hilliard homes, which are two high rises from which a lot of students from NTA enroll. Those are not the people that she's thinking about when she describes her community. And it fits into a larger narrative that I think plays out time and time again in this country. When Mitch McConnell says American voters and African American voters, as if those two groups are different. And Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about in one of his texts the idea and the behavior of people in this country, white people in particular, who take what they want, and the casualties along the way are just that. It's just collateral. Bodies were broken. We did our best, I think, is how Ta-Nehisi Coates describes it. And that was exactly what was happening in this case. We have people in the community who feel entitled, who feel privileged, who feel that it's their right to take from others in order to meet the needs of their own children. And so that's why I think this film is so important, not only because it represents the great strength of our community at NTA, but because it fits into a larger narrative that plays out in every city, every community, probably in America.
Yeah, I think, touching on, of course, the clear issue here, gentrification, but what a lot of folks are talking about now, critical race theory, you see that coming up in this documentary, and it's extremely powerful. Isaac, I want to come back to you. I want to ask you also if you've been watching Abbott Elementary. We'll get to that later. Kevin and Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. I want to talk a little bit about the filmmaking process. Kevin, in particular, as an educator in film, I watch a lot of documentaries that about kids or for kids. But this is the first time I've seen a documentary that allows students to really represent themselves and talk for themselves in an incredibly powerful way. And I really want to give you accolades for what you were able to do there. Was that part of the plan, that the voices of the students were going to be a major highlight of the story?
Most definitely, because that was something that I always saw as we were following the story. The students were really leading the charge in the fight to save NTA. The students were there at these board meetings and testifying in front of the city officials on why they should not go through with this proposal to change their school into a high school and basically effectively close and shutter their entire community. They were the ones that clearly knew what the stakes were. They were the ones that understood that a lot of these people had never come into their school and seen it for themselves and seen all the successes that they were cultivating on a daily basis. And thankfully for them, you can never count out the youth of America. You can't count them out. They understand what's going on. And when they have an opportunity to find their voice and become activists on their own, they're going to do that. And so we saw that in this instance here. And there was no doubt that I wanted to highlight a number of those young children as they found their voice and fought for their school and fought for their community.
Rachel, I want to ask you quickly. We just talked about a documentary called 70 Acres in Chicago about the housing development, Cabrini Green, that it's an older doc, and I really recommend anybody who loved this documentary to go ahead and give that one a view as well. Extremely powerful. And Rachel, what I want to ask you is, I don't know a lot of other folks who love their city as much as people from Chicago love Chicago. I mean, it's really kind of an extraordinary thing. How do you feel like the narrative of this story, just the passion for the school and the passion for community and the activism bit, is that what you also grew up with, like coming from Chicago, being in Chicago? Is it in your blood to just like defend your space and your city?
I think there is a long history of organizing and activism in Chicago that probably affects us all on a subconscious level. I went to Chicago Public Schools, but I didn't feel that same type of identity that I think the students at NTA felt with their school. And I think that's another, exciting thing about being able to highlight the students' voices and how, we're able to see how they really connected with their school, how their identity is kind of intertwined with NTA, and it really kind of made them the activists that they are. So I don't think you get that special experience at every school. I think that we found a definitely a unique situation, but there is definitely a history of activism. A lot of people. There's a strong activist community in Chicago, I would say, and I think that's that's part of the fabric of the film as well.
Kevin, did you draw from that strong sense of activism and history? Of course, Fred Hampton was one of the kings of understanding how city and the states were misaligning with the Black community in Chicago, and paid the ultimate price for it. Is that an energy that you bring to all of your filmmaking?
Well, certainly in this instance, it was, the power rests with the people, right? That's something that Fred Hampton and the Panthers believed in. And you definitely see that in this instance, that the power rested with the NTA community. And once they understood how to, collectively use that power, they were able to win. And that just goes to show you that, as a collective group, you can fight for social justice and you can win. It doesn't happen all the time, right? And that's probably the one thing that makes this story unique, that you're probably expecting a different result to occur, and it doesn't in this instance. But that's really based on the power that all these community activists here, these regular parents, people like Elizabeth Greer, who she just wants the best education for her children. That's all she's stepping into. She's not stepping into this role of an activist, but she realizes that this plan is not right. This plan is unjust. And she's angry about it. And that's kind of like the beginning of what an activist is all about. And so every one of us has that kind of beat of an activist within us, and it just takes something to activate that and fight for change there, and fight for, in this instance, fight for the status quo to keep what they wanted here, their elementary school, which was a beacon for the children in this community.
Isaac, were you ever afraid?
Yes, many times. I think it would be naive to say otherwise, but I think for all of us, we experienced fear on some level. For me, the fear was of losing my job, being removed from my role as principal, from causing harm to children who went downtown and protested and demonstrated, for teachers who were advocating and speaking out and fighting to save NTA. There was constant fear, yes.
Rachel and Kevin, can you just describe a little bit of what it's like when you are working on a documentary that has, or you're working on a story that is going to have an ending that is unclear or maybe unsatisfactory? Kind of, how does that work in your storyboarding, like the technical bit of it, and what that feels like, to have no idea how the story is going to turn out?
Yeah, there's definitely some tense moments. I hearken back to a book that I was reading during the course of the making of the film. It's written by Dr. Eve Ewing. It's called Ghosts in the Schoolyard. It's a book that looked at the 2013 school closings that are mentioned in the film, where there was more than 49 elementary schools closed under the Rahm Emanuel administration. And she talks about the closing of a school for a community almost being like that of a person suffering a death in the family. And then there's 5 stages of grief that a community undergoes. And so I was kind of looking at those stages of grief and thinking about, okay, well, if NTA does close and is transformed into this high school, we're going to follow that to some point, to some conclusion point. But what are those stages of grief going to be like? And there were examples in the book of what those kind of looked like. And I started to think about, well, okay, this is what I should be looking out for. But, thankfully, we didn't have to go down that route, right?
Rachel, how did that live for you on the producing end?
Yeah, I was just going to say there were moments, definitely tense moments, where we kind of questioned what we were doing because we didn't know how the film was going to end. I think we at times we were both convinced that that the school was gonna be closed, and that was gonna be a really hard story to tell. And I think that you have to kind of be on your feet, be able spontaneous, be able to capture what happens, what's unfolding before your eyes, and kind of go with it. And I think we were really lucky for the school and also for the documentary that everything ended the way it did.
Kevin, are you keeping up with any of the student activists or with any of the parents, with Elizabeth specifically, who was just such an incredibly powerful woman and admirable energy that she brought to the doc? Do you keep up with any of your protagonists?
Certainly, yeah. We're still very close with Elizabeth, especially as the film is rolling out across America right now. But she's still a professor at Harold Washington College here in Chicago. Her children are still at NTA. And Isaac, you can kind of help me out on this, what exact grades they are in right now. But yeah, we've also continued to follow some of the students like Taylor Wallace and Marie Crawford. They both are seniors in high school right now, getting ready to go to college. And Ya, who is another student in there, she is at one of the top high schools in Chicago right now as a sophomore. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Isaac, but I believe that's her grade. Freshman, sorry about that. Yep, yeah. She's a freshman and doing extraordinarily well. I think one of the keystones of the film was that watching that mentoring that was going on between Isaac and Ya. She's really just blossomed into a confident young woman, who is really looking at becoming a lawyer and that kind of thing. So really excited to see what the future holds for everybody.
Before we close, I wanna close off with a question for all of you about the film's success and the current festival run. But Isaac, before I do that, for parents and individuals who don't want to see this kind of marginalization in their own communities, who feel like they might want to do something, whether we're talking about issues of gentrification, school closures, the redrawn lines of districts, or critical race theory. What do you think people should really be paying attention to in the upcoming elections, and where should they be focusing their attention on in order to be the most effective, in your opinion, from a person who's just like lived this experience?
Sure. So we could get off into a really fantastic tangent about national politics, but I think for the sake of being very concise and speaking to the heart of this film, I think what's most important is to build coalitions with your neighbors, to build coalitions with people that you don't know that well. In our film, parents that you get to meet and experience along the way come from different places in the city with different economic backgrounds, different experiences growing up in the city of Chicago. And yet through the film, and even before, obviously, Kevin and Rachel got to document our fight, parents from different places in Chicago, different experiences, came together to support and grow and develop our school community. And so I think that as people, we have to get past our own differences by learning to listen and to recognize the commonality of the things that we all want for our children in particular. And I think that we can sometimes get bogged down in conversations about very specific things like critical race theory, which is an important conversation. But I think that when we get behind and get underneath the morality of critical race theory and the perspectives that everybody brings to the table, we can have a much richer conversation when we start to talk about our values as people, because we have a lot more in common than we think, and a lot more in common than we know when we're talking about an issue like critical race theory on its surface. We have to get underneath the problems to understand their root causes so that we can begin to, I believe, come together and form coalitions that will ultimately lead to better things for all of us.
Thank you, Isaac. Kevin, I think in this documentary, you did a really great job at doing just that and highlighting the history of the community so that we really understood not just that people were passionate about, folks that look like themselves, but we're talking about like a deep history and culture. This documentary has had an incredible festival run. I want to congratulate Kevin and Rachel and Isaac, of course, and everybody who participated. South by Southwest, Full Frame, and True False. I mean, those are films. Those are festivals that are not easily dismissed at all. So you guys have an awesome project on your hands here, and we're really proud to present it at Docklands. How are you all feeling now that this project is getting audiences excited and talking about, what you've been cooking for the past few years?
It's been a long time coming for sure. It's been very exciting to see how audiences are really enjoying the movie, are resonating with its themes. And it just goes to show you that it's not just a Chicago thing that's going on here when you talk about these issues of gentrification, race, class, power, and privilege. These things are happening across America. And so people are recognizing that and they're responding to it. So the response has been incredible. We can't wait for more people and more audiences to view the film, whether it be here at Docklands or at other festivals, or eventually, on our national public television broadcast with POV in December. So we're all excited and really thrilled and grateful.
Rachel, is this what you were expecting? Is this what you were hoping, this reception?
It's a really fun experience, and I just hope that everyone who sees the film will kind of keep this in their minds about school closings, the devastating impact of school closings, how there need to be better solutions and more of a priority on public education.
Isaac, how does it feel to have been documented and legendized, honestly, in this way as a principal with just a community full of loving parents and students, but as a person who was, really ultimately the one who you saw in the documentary face some consequences. How does it feel to be on a big screen?
I mean, it's a special experience, no doubt. It's incredibly gratifying. Deeply grateful that Kevin and Rachel saw something special in our school community to document what occurred. And so I'm glad that the film was made and that we'll always have it to go back to. Being the principal at NTA was the great honor of my career. Nothing will ever top it. And what we did together in keeping the school open will remain one of the best things that I was ever part of and helped to do. So the experience has been absolutely wonderful and overwhelming in just wonderful, great ways.
Thank you so much, Isaac, Rachel, and Kevin, for joining us today. Folks, this was the Q&A for Let the Little Light Shine. Thank you so much for watching the documentary, listening and learning, and in love. And we hope that you got the same sense of satisfaction that all the programmers did and everybody who watched it. And we appreciate you. Continue to watch the rest of what Docklands Documentary Film Festival has to offer. And thank you again for joining us.